September 14th, 1934, was the Friday before the start of the fall term at Mount Hermon School for Boys in Mount Hermon, Massachusetts. The school staff had already arrived back on campus, as had 35 returning students, who were helping prepare the campus for the arrival of the rest of the students and the start of classes. Reverend Elliot Speer, the school's headmaster, along with his wife Charlotte, who went by the nickname Holly, and their 3 daughters, ages 12, 10, and 4, had returned to campus from their summer vacation at Lake Timagami in Ontario late the previous Sunday night. The headmaster and his family lived in Ford Cottage, a large brick home on the school's campus. On the night of the 14th, the family, along with Holly's parents, who were visiting at the time, ate dinner at their habitual time of 7 o'clock. Around 8 o'clock, Headmaster Speer went into his study on the first floor of the home to do paperwork, as was his custom. Holly Speer was in the bedroom directly above the study, talking with her mother, sometime between 8:15 and 8:20, when she heard a sound she originally thought was some sort of explosion. As she ran downstairs, her father ran out of the drawing room, which was across the hall from Headmaster Speer's study. The headmaster staggered out of his study, saying, "I don't know what happened." He was bleeding from wounds in his right arm and side. Holly and her father supported Elliot and lowered him to the floor as he began to collapse. A doctor was called, and Holly and her father did their best to control the bleeding while they waited for him to arrive. Holly sat on the first step of the stairwell and held her husband as he began to lose consciousness. When the doctor arrived, there was little he could do. Elliot Speer was pronounced dead at 8:55 p.m. As people began arriving at Ford Cottage, including police officers and administrators from the school, Holly Speer remained sitting on that first stair, holding her husband's hand. When she was encouraged to go upstairs to lie down, she refused, saying, "No, I don't feel as though I should ever leave this spot." It was not until after her husband's body was taken away that she finally moved from the first step. The wounds the headmaster sustained came from double-aught buckshot, fired from a 12-gauge shotgun. 8 pieces of the buckshot had hit him in the chest and shoulder, and 1 had pierced his heart. Based on the angle of his wounds, it appeared as though his killer had shot him as he stood up and reached for something on the bookshelf next to his desk. Headmaster Elliot Speer was just 35 years old at the time of his death. Elliot had been born on November 1st, 1898, in Englewood, New Jersey. His father, Dr. Robert E. Speer, was a prominent preacher and writer. He had served as the moderator of the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church, and, at the time of his son's death, he was the senior secretary of the church's Board of Foreign Missions. Elliot had been educated at Phillips Academy in Massachusetts before returning to New Jersey to attend Princeton. In May 1917, he put his education on hold to go to England to assist the British Army YMCA's efforts during World War I. He ended up working near the front lines in France, where he was involved in a serious motorcycle accident that nearly cost him his life and forced him to return to the United States in the summer of 1918. When the influenza epidemic began that same year, Elliot volunteered at a makeshift hospital set up to deal with the overwhelming number of patients. He graduated from Princeton with a degree in theology in February 1921. That March, he married Holly, a graduate of Vassar. The couple moved to Scotland so that Elliot could attend the Theological College of the United Free Church in Edinburgh. After completing school there, he worked for the Old First Presbyterian Church in New York City before being named chaplain and head of the Bible department at Lafayette College in Pennsylvania in 1924. During his first year there, he was ordained a minister. Elliot Speer first became affiliated with the Mount Hermon School through his father. The elder Speer was a member of the Board of Trustees for the school and its sister institution. Elliot joined his father, serving on the Board of Trustees of the 2 schools in 1926, and was elected its president by his peers in 1927. In 1931, he was selected as the successor to the headmaster of Mount Hermon, but he took a year to return to Edinburgh to complete his thesis before beginning his tenure in the position. On October 30th, 1932, Elliot was installed as the headmaster at Mount Hermon during a ceremony at Memorial Chapel on campus. Speer was a youthful, energetic, and popular headmaster. He was admired by students because he treated them with respect and he was teased by them for his habit of speeding around campus in his dark blue convertible. The young headmaster was beneficial to the school for more practical reasons as well. Soon after being named headmaster, Speer launched major fundraising and financial planning initiatives to secure the future of the financially struggling school. Speer's appointment as headmaster was not without controversy, however. Mount Hermon, founded in 1881, along with its sister school, the Northfield Seminary, founded in 1879, had been established by famed evangelist Dwight L. Moody. The schools were created to provide educational opportunities to children from poor families. As only the very wealthy attended college at this time, the schools were not necessarily designed to prepare their students for higher education. The education both schools provided was rooted in Christian ethics, with Moody hoping that the graduates of his schools would be positive Christian examples to those around them when they entered the workforce after they graduated. While a world war, major industrial improvements, and the stock market crash of 1929 had all occurred between the founding of the school and 1932, many of the policies of the institution had been left unchanged over that entire time period. Headmaster Speer's predecessor, Headmaster Henry Cutler, had been in the position for more than 4 decades, which only encouraged things to remain as they always had been in the school. Headmaster Speer was a far more progressive leader. He lifted a ban on playing cards, he allowed intramural sports to be played on campus, and he allowed students to read newspapers on Sunday afternoons. He also allowed the male students at Mount Hermon and the female students from Northfield Seminary to socially interact through dances on campus, which had previously been banned. Headmaster Speer even brought up a dance teacher from New York City to instruct students from both schools on the etiquette of dancing, as well as how to waltz. He also focused on improving the quality of the education Mount Hermon provided, elevating the curriculum and bringing in more educated teachers. While most of these changes seem tame to the modern observer, in the early 1930s, they were fairly drastic, especially to the large conservative percentage of the school staff, trustees, and alumni. While Headmaster Speer's appointment was endorsed by his predecessor and enough members of the board to get it approved, it was aggressively opposed by other individuals affiliated with the school. They feared that all the progressive changes Headmaster Speer was enacting were causing the school to lose the Christian identity it had been founded with. Headmaster Speer was a devout Christian, and the school remained a religious institution, but there were still concerns that his modern viewpoint was taking away from the original character and mission of Mount Hermon. This, of course, led to concerns that Headmaster Speer had been murdered by some sort of religious fanatic who opposed his more progressive attitudes towards the direction of Mount Hermon. No one suspect who could have committed the crime was found amongst the group of people who opposed Headmaster Speer's policies, however. This was not because of a lack of effort by the police. By the end of September, they had interviewed more than 250 people in connection to the case. There was also an extensive physical search of the area in the days and weeks after the murder. Mount Hermon students participated in the search of the campus until they started classes the Thursday after Headmaster Speer's death. During the initial search of the crime scene, a state police trooper had discovered the British mystery novel The Public School Murder amongst Headmaster Speer's collection of books in his study. In the novel, a school headmaster is shot through a window with a rifle as he sat at his desk in his study. Headmaster Speer was known to lend out his books, which made investigators wonder if he had lent the novel to his killer, who in turn based the crime on the events of the book. In the book, the murder weapon was discarded in a lake. This made investigators more determined to thoroughly search the 2 major bodies of water near the crime scene: Shadow Lake, which was on Mount Hermon's campus between Ford Cottage and the main road, and the Connecticut River, which was just outside of school property. The lake was drained, and drivers did their best to search the river, but nothing tied to the case was ever discovered. Police slowly cleared suspects of involvement in the crime one by one. One person who they could not clear was Thomas Elder, the dean of Mount Hermon. 55-year-old Dean Elder was an alumnus of Mount Hermon and had been the head of the school's agriculture department, becoming dean when the program was cut from the school. He was an expert on Holstein cattle and their breeding. As dean, Elder had considered himself second in command at the school and expected to be named headmaster when Henry Cutler retired. When he was passed over for the young and vibrant Reverend Speer, Elder, who was in poor health, presumably understood that he had missed his one opportunity to become headmaster, which would give him a motive to get rid of Speer. After Headmaster Speer's death, Elder was one of 3 people assigned to take over the responsibilities of headmaster by committee, but was not even made the chairman of that committee. When he was told of the arrangement, he initially said that he would rather resign than accept it. He viewed this plan as another slight against him, but eventually accepted the arrangement. There are a lot of circumstances that make Elder look guilty. He had called Ford Cottage from Holbrook Hall, the school's administration building, shortly after Headmaster Speer had been shot, demanding to speak with him. This call could have been made to find out if he had been successful in killing Speer. Witnesses who had gone hunting with Elder also claimed that he owned a 12-gauge shotgun, the same type of weapon used in the murder. Elder denied ever owning such a weapon. The day after the murder, Elder was seen with a bandage around his right trigger finger. Those same witnesses who had seen Elder hunt with the 12-gauge shotgun also claimed that the weapon had a faulty trigger guard that could easily cause such an injury to someone who fired it. Elder also drove a dark-colored sedan, consistent with a vehicle seen driving away from the general area of Ford Cottage shortly after Headmaster Speer was shot. Shortly after Headmaster Speer's murder, Elder also began circulating 2 letters, one he claimed to have received from the headmaster, and one he claimed was his reply to it, that made the 2 men seem to be on very friendly terms. The letters are generally considered to be fakes, due to the language used in them, the fact that they were unsigned, factual errors about Headmaster Speer's actions, and the fact that Headmaster Speer would not have had time to type the letter the day it was dated, because he was out of his office for almost all of the day. Elder's motivation for creating this letter and the response to it is difficult to understand if he did not feel it necessary to divert suspicion away from himself. While all of these facts have led to Elder being considered the main suspect in the case in the decades after the murder, it is important to note that all of these facts are simply circumstantial evidence. Furthermore, some of them have perfectly reasonable alternative explanations. For example, the injury to Elder's finger may not have come from a faulty trigger guard. Francis Bailey, a math teacher at Mount Hermon, had gone with Elder to Ford Cottage after he had made the phone call from Holbrook Hall the night of the murder. Bailey testified that Elder had tripped and fallen, putting his hands out in front of him as he went down, as they walked into the cottage in the dark, and had later blamed his injured fingers on this fall. According to Bailey, Elder's hands had not been bandaged while he was at Holbrook Hall that night, which would have been after Headmaster Speer had been shot. The timeline of Dean Elder's actions, as well as the witnesses who corroborate his movements that night, also make it seem less likely that he was the killer. That being said, almost all of these witnesses were very unsure of the exact timing of the events of that night. In the original timeline Dean Elder had given to the police, on the night of September 14th, he had dinner with his wife and then drove his car to Morgan's garage to have a headlight replaced. He then drove back to campus and went into his office in Holbrook Hall at 7:40, where he stayed until approximately 9 p.m., when he made the call to Ford College and then made his way there after hearing of Headmaster Speer's death. However, based on the testimony of the mechanic at the garage, he did not arrive there until 8 or 8:30, which throws off Elder's timeline completely. A senior at Mount Hermon, Albert LaRue, also testified that he had arrived at Elder's home at 8 o'clock that night, and that Elder had been home at the time, not leaving for the garage for another 10 to 20 minutes after his arrival. The exact time of Headmaster Speer's murder is not known, but it was most likely between 8:15 and 8:20. With this corrected timeline, Elder would not have been in Holbrook Hall at the time of the murder as he claimed, but he would have had a very narrow window of opportunity to commit the crime. Elder lived very close to Ford Cottage, but given his age and poor health, it does not seem likely that he could have quickly made his way through the trees surrounding the cottage in the dark to make the shot and then make a speedy exit from the scene. The date of the headmaster's murder does seem to support the theory that he was killed for his position at the school, however. It is possible that Headmaster Speer was killed just before the start of the new term, because that would force the Board of Trustees to name an acting headmaster quickly. Lacking the time to perform a thorough search for a new headmaster, they would most likely appoint an acting headmaster already affiliated with the school, which Elder may have again assumed would have been himself. With the campus due to fill up with students and potential witnesses so soon, September 14th was essentially the last chance the killer would have had to carry out the crime with this reduced chance of being seen. It is possible that the killer watched the window of Headmaster Speer's study every night after the Speer family returned to campus, waiting for the right opportunity. If Elder were in fact the culprit, this would make it more likely that he would have been capable of making his way to the spot where the shot was taken in the dark so quickly, despite his poor health and lack of coordination. Elder's trip to Morgan's garage that night may have been an excuse to get out of the house to commit the murder while he still had the chance, as well as to give himself an alibi. While the timeline is tight, it is technically possible for Dean Elder to have left his house at 8:10, driven the 1 to 2 minutes to Ford Cottage, fired the fatal shot between 8:15 and 8:20, and arrived at Morgan's garage just 2.5 miles away at 8:30. With a lack of physical evidence, most importantly the murder weapon, authorities were hesitant to bring charges against Elder, despite all the suspicion surrounding him. To try to move the case forward, they instead moved to gather more official witness testimony. On December 3, 1934, Judge Timothy Hayes began presiding over an inquest into the case at the Franklin County Courthouse in Greenfield, Massachusetts, at the request of the district attorney. The testimony given during the inquest was not made public at the time. Witnesses provided testimony until December 14th. On January 9, 1935, Judge Hayes ruled that the evidence presented at the inquest failed to provide enough evidence against any one individual to send the case on to a grand jury. He acknowledged that there was a plausible suspect in the case, presumably Dean Elder, although he was not mentioned by name in the ruling, but argued that all of the evidence presented against him was merely circumstantial, and was not very strong circumstantial evidence at that. Dean Elder left the Mount Hermon school shortly thereafter, retiring to a poultry farm in New Hampshire. In 1937, he was charged with threatening S. Allen Norton, a former treasurer at Mount Hermon, with a shotgun. He was acquitted at trial despite eyewitness testimony after his wife provided him with an alibi. He died in September 1948 while classifying cattle at a dairy farm in New Jersey. Holly Speer went on to be the headmistress of 2 different schools for girls over the course of her career. Her 3 daughters, by all accounts, grew into successful and intelligent women. Mount Hermon merged with its sister school in 1971 and is now known as Northfield Mount Hermon School. The identity of Headmaster Speer's killer will most likely always remain unknown.